Captain Ilyanivor stood alone on the observation deck of the Aurelius, her reflection a wavering silhouette against the glowing tendrils of the Anchorus Nebula. Outside, vast curtains of ionized gas swirled in hues of violet and emerald, their slow, rhythmic pulsing the only sound in the vacuum beyond glass and steel. She breathed in deeply, tasting the faint tang of recycled oxygen, trying to steady her nerves for the long patrol ahead. A single, brilliant star the Coalition designated Object C9X burned at the edge of her view. The uncharted systems beyond it were as silent as tombstones, and rumor held that ghost ships and drift stations lurked among the shadowed asteroids. The Sovereign Coalition had dispatched the Aurelius on this mission to ensure that no unlicensed vessels trespassed here, but Captain Vor suspected there was more at stake. Whispers in the council chambers spoke of renegade pirates, of Dominion scouts mapping weak points, even of something called the Ember Tide, a mysterious force said to strike without warning and leave nothing but ruin in its wake. The intercom clicked with Lieutenant Scorin's soft voice over the deck speakers. "Captain, bridge to observation deck." Ver nodded to herself, straightened her uniform's insignia, 3 interlocking rings denoting her rank and service to the Coalition, and made her way through the corridor. The Aurelius was a marvel of modern engineering, a desert-gray behemoth, nearly a kilometer long, armored in layered composites and armed with twin-mount electromagnetic railguns, clustered plasma turrets, and a complement of 30 Valkyria fighters. Its crew numbered over 2,000, drawn from 15 different member worlds, and yet, here in the silent reaches of the expanse, even such power felt fragile. As she stepped onto the bridge, the lights dimmed to operational red. Holographic. Star charts floated midair, crews at their stations murmured in anticipation, and the primaries hummed with energy. Admiral Sareth Marish, her mentor and commander of the sector flotilla, hovered in a round holo viewport above the tactical console. "Status report, Captain." Marish's tone was clipped, businesslike. "Everything nominal, Admiral," Vor replied crisply. "Scanners are sweeping for transponders. No contacts aside from civilian freighters in adjacent lanes. All systems green, crew on high alert." She paused, glancing at the dispersion of Valkyria launchers. "ETA to patrol coordinates is 2 hours. Marish's image flickered. His silver hair was cropped close. Age had etched lines into his weathered face, but his blue eyes still sparked with iron resolve. "Good. Keep it that way. Maintain strict, calm silence until you reach Zone Echo 9. The Council wants to keep the sector under wraps for now." Vor inclined her head. "Understood." The holo flickered out. Vor turned back to the main viewport. A corridor of stellar light stretched before them, walls of twinkling points receding into infinity. She felt her pulse quicken. Out here, a single misstep could ignite a war. "Lieutenant Scorin," Vor addressed her tactical officer. "Continue passive scans. Divert no energy to active emissions unless I authorize." Scorin tapped at her console, eyes dancing over the data readouts. At 20 kilometers distance, tiny flecks of debris drifted near the nebula's edge. "No traffic approaching from the corridor," she reported. "Sensor ghosts persist in the nebula's ion trails. We're getting anomalous readings, but nothing that locks a transponder signature." "Hold pattern alpha," Vor said. Sliding into her command chair, she ran a hand through her dark hair, then pressed a command pad to bring up her personal monitors. There, the log of known Coalition outposts alternated with images of the freighter's rust-colored hulls, drifting through space lanes, their crews too wary to linger. The Aurelius rolled smoothly into position, retro thrusters quieting as it matched the drift of the Expanse's ambient field. From the fighter control station, Commander Ril Asa gave her a thumbs up. A swarm of sleek, arrowhead-shaped Valkyries nestled behind the Dreadnought's dorsal hangar bay, engines glowing with cooled plasmas. "Everything in the fighters is ready, Captain," Asa called. He was a tall man from Tethys, with skin the color of burnished bronze and a perpetual smile that belied the intensity of his focus. "Pilots on standby. All pods checked for weapons and fuel cells." Vor smiled faintly. "Thank you, Commander." Then she rose, her boots clicking on the deck plating. "Good work, everyone. Let's be ready for anything. No one spoke as the minutes passed. The only sound the hum of power conduits and the distant rumble of the Aurelius's core reactor. Vor considered turning in for a rest. Cycle-long patrols demanded discipline and endurance, but the edge of expectancy kept her alert. Then the warning klaxon sounded, shattering the calm. Red strobes flashed, sensors pinged erratically. Report, Vor barked. Gripping the armrests of her chair, Lieutenant Skorin's fingers slashed across her console. Transponder lock, one signature military-class hull, moving at 250 kilometers per second along an intercept vector for Zone Echo 9. Vor's pulse spiked. Identify friend or foe. I can't. The transponder code is unregistered. Shields are active. Hull density matches a mission profile. Reads as a dreadnought. A dreadnought. Vor's mind raced. The Coalition maintained a strict registry of warships and patrol vessels. Anything unregistered should not and could not be this size or power. Yet here it was. Bearing down on them, open a channel, she ordered. Standard hailing. Frequency, fall back to mercantile. If no response, she waited, breath catching. Static crackled. Then came a single, cold transmission in an accented Terran Standard English. Warning, a human warship has entered the sector. Comply with our instructions or be destroyed. Vor felt the temperature drop. She exchanged a look with Skorin. Human, she echoed, voice low. But humanity hasn't fielded warships in over 3 centuries. Commander Asa pressed his palms to the console. They're jamming all frequencies. I can't break through. Marish's face appeared above the console again, stern and swift. Captain Vor, this is Admiral Marish. You are to shadow the vessel, only do not engage. Relay all tactical data back to the fleet. If they fire upon you, I give you permission to defend yourselves. Vor hesitated, then nodded. Aye, Admiral. Shadow only. Marish's holo winked out. Vor rose and strode to the tactical display. On the holo map, 2 icons hovered. A cobalt triangle for the Aurelius, and a larger, fiery orange diamond for the dreadnought bearing that ominous phoenix emblem. The human warship closed the distance at alarming speed, its bow casting a faint orange glow as it cut through residual solar wind. Prepare chase pods. Vor said quietly. We're following, but no provocation. Let them make the first move. Asa tapped his data pad. Chase pods ready. I've pre-programmed them to maintain a 10-kilometer standoff. Weapons locked, but not primed. Good. Vor folded her arms. She studied the nebulous shimmering clouds, feeling the weight of centuries of peace resting on this moment. If a single torpedo flew, the Coalition response would be swift, and the embers of conflict might blaze across systems. Worse, it would reawaken ancient fears, the specter of humanity reclaiming space by force. Outside the viewport, the dreadnought emerged from behind a veil of violet gas. It was enormous, nearly 3 kilometers in length, with a prow shaped like a talon claw. Plasma cannon clusters lined its flanks, and its hull bore the scars of countless engagements. A beacon light pulsed at its dorsal crest, colored deep crimson. Vor's breath caught. The vessel was silent, no active targeting, no firing solutions displayed. Yet its intent was clear. Annex this sector without witnesses. Alari's station, Vor whispered, scrolling through the readouts. A freighter hub. They must have come for the trade lanes. Skorin's eyes widened. Sir, their movement. On their launch bays, fighter pods deploying. Prepare our Valkyries, Vor ordered. She turned away from the tactical holomap. This is no longer mere reconnaissance. They want confrontation, and if they overstep, we'll show them the strength of the Coalition. The bridge plunged into coordinated efficiency. Valkyria pilots strapped into their command pods. Final checks pinged green, and the hangar doors yawned open beneath the needlepoint stars as the first fighters surged out. Their plasma wakes glowed against the nebular backdrop. Vor allowed herself a grim smile. A new player had entered the expanse, and the Aurelius would be ready. The crimson glint of plasma trails cut through the nebular haze as Valkyria fighters and human pods danced a deadly ballet between the stars. Captain Ilyanavor stood on the bridge of the Aurelius, hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical hologram flicker with hundreds of fast-moving symbols. Each bright streak of light represented a Life Coalition pilot or human warrior, hurtling toward the same point in space, weapons primed. Status report. Ver's voice rang out. Steady and commanding. Lieutenant Skorin's eyes never left her console. Coalition Valkyries have engaged the human fighters, for down so far, to damaged. Their pods are agile. They have already disabled one interceptor with an electromagnetic pulse. A groan rippled through the bridge crew as the image of a spiraling Valkyria flashed, its engines sputtering out. Across the tactical display, the human dreadnought loomed like a dark sentinel. Its own point defense lasers traced arcs toward the swarm, intercepting incoming missiles with surgical precision. They're protecting something behind that barrage, Skorin speculated. Our fighters can't break through their screen. Vor nodded. Shift to suppression tactics. Fire warning shots across their flanks. We need to force their hand but avoid killing pilots if possible. Across the void, the human commander's voice crackled over the hailing frequency and clipped. Terran Standard. Coalition vessels, withdraw your fighters. This is your final warning. Any further aggression will be met with annihilation. Tell them to stand down. Vor ordered Skorin, and signal that we mean no harm. We seek only dialogue. Skorin's fingers flew. 10 seconds pass. Then the human reply, no response. Initiating next phase. Ver's jaw tightened. Next phase? She turned to Commander Ril Asa at fighter control. Hold the Valkyries. Back redesign to escort only. No new engagements unless fired upon. Understood. Asa's voice was urgent, but calm. He gestured at his console. They're sweeping their fighter bay, deploying heavy assault drones. At least 6. Each the size of a small frigate. The hologram updated. 6 orange diamonds swarmed out from the dreadnought's flanks, moving directly toward the battered Valkyries. 2 of the pods shuddered under crushing railgun fire and spun apart. But one drone unleashed a volley of micromissiles that detonated in the open, showering 3 fighters with metal shrapnel. Pull back, Vor shouted, but the fighters were already executing evasive maneuvers. From the hangar bay's interior sensors, she could see them, tiny silhouettes against the nebula's swirl, slipping behind the Aurelius's main bulk. For cover, the bridge. Lights dimmed further as the Aurelius shifted power from life support to shields. The dreadnought's broadside plasma cannons flared into life, shields at 60%. Came the report, we can't sustain another direct hit. Vor eased back into her chair. Tactical, plot a safe retreat pattern. We lure them closer to the nebula's edge, where their sensors will be fooled by the ion trails. The tactical officer toggled a series of commands. The hologram's grid. Lines stretched, showing the skirting path threading through pockets of dense gas. Course set. Captain, Vor exhaled sharply. Helm, engage. The Aurelius pulsed its thrusters, slipping laterally in a graceful arc that carried it deeper into violet fog. The dreadnought followed, plasma bolts punching through drifting clouds like cosmic lightning. On the bridge, the thrum of energy weapons and the rattling of distant impacts created a din of controlled chaos. Communication from the dreadnought, Skorin announced. Vor turned to face the calm officer. They played the transmission, a single, authoritative voice edged with the slight rasp of metallic vocal filters. You cannot hide behind gas. You will be destroyed. The statement ended abruptly, replaced by static. Vor clenched her fists. Open encrypted coalition line. I want Admiral Marish's channel now. The Admiral's on break from comms, the calm officer replied. They've delegated authority to us. Ver's gaze flicked to the tactical display. Several Valkyries, patched up and relit, were ready to escort. Fine, send this over. She read from her pad. This is Captain Ilyana Vor of the Sovereign. Coalition Dreadnought Aurelius. We do not wish to escalate hostilities. We request immediate parley to establish intentions. We propose a neutral zone 50 kilometers from both vessels. You have 15 minutes to respond. Skorin transmitted the hails. 2 minutes passed. Then 6 piercing sonic bursts answered the call. Jukebox tones meant only one thing in naval etiquette. Prepare to be boarded. Ver's pulse pounded. In her ears, boarding parties were the ultimate declaration of intent. They're not here for talks, she said softly. They want to capture us. She turned to Commander Asa. How long until the boarding shuttles reach our hull? Less than 3 minutes, he replied, face pale. They're moving capital class pods, heavy grav drives. We'll feel the impact. Vor looked around the bridge, faces tight with tension, eyes flicking between screens. She made a decision. Evasive maneuver to deploy point defense nets. At the ventral hull, the crew leapt into action. Deck lights shifted from red to blue as ventilation grates clicked shut and grav forges roared. Down in the hangar bays, crews sealed the fighter pods behind blast doors. Minutes ticked no. Seconds. Suddenly, the Aurelius shuddered violently. The boarding pods struck the outer armor. Magnetic clamps biting into the hull. Alarms blared. Smoldering sparks flew from the sustainer. Conduits. Hull breach in section 4-2. A voice called. Ver's heart lurched. She slammed her fist on the console. Seal bulkheads. Activate internal fire suppression. The bulkhead doors groaned shut. Smoke and the hiss of extinguishers filled the corridors beyond. On the tactical holomap, tiny red crosses marked the sealed zones. Vor took a steadying breath. They had bought time, but the intruders would find a way. Preparations for close quarters support, Vor ordered. Marine platoons to muster points Charlie and Delta. Gravity locks at maximum. We'll repel them in the corridors, Captain, Skorin said, voice tight. I see readings on the boarding pods. They've formed a cluster around the secondary airlock. Their energy signatures match 300 combat-rated soldiers. 300. Ver's eyes narrowed. They're going for a mass insertion. She turned to Asa. Can you range a corridor ambush, force them into the hangar? Bay's med lab section. It's a narrow conduit, we can trap them there. Asa tapped his tablet. Yes, Captain. Redirect security drones and lock the route. Hangar bay to med lab corridor will be sealed in 45 seconds. Ver nodded grimly. Then she keyed her mic. All hands, this is the captain. We are under boarding attack. Follow standard repel boarding protocols. Hold the line. Do not let them breach section 4-3 under any circumstances. Valkyries are on standby for orbital strikes if we lose the corridor. A chorus of affirmative shouts filled the calm channels. Deep beneath the bridge, Marines donned their power armor and Spartanic helmets, their rifles humming to life. Security. Drones roamed the maintenance shafts, scanners probing for intruders. On the dreadnought, Captain Elias Crew stood on his own bridge's stark, angular room illuminated by red warning lights. Behind him, the enormous viewport framed the Aurelius, its shields flickering blue-green. Crew's jaw was set. He activated his console. Phase 2. Lieutenant, unleash the shock teams and seal our boarding pods. I want the Aurelius's bridge taken before reinforcements can arrive. Understood, sir. His XO, Lieutenant Moya, swiped across the display. Shock teams are charging. They're armed with anti-grav charges and containment clamps. They plan to cut the inner hull plating. Crew leaned forward. Good. We take their command center and surrender terms will be ours to dictate. Back on the Coalition dreadnought, Ver's tactical holomap pulsed as dots representing Marines. Intercepted small clusters of human troops. Laser rifles spat green beams. Concussion grenades sent shockwaves through the corridors. Reports crackled in. Sector fire suppression down. 2 Marines injured but holding. Enemy anti-grav mine detonated breach in Sector Charlie 2. Rebels retreating into maintenance ducts. Vor felt a twist of satisfaction, welcome, but tempered. The human soldiers were formidable, their tactics disciplined. She keyed. Her calm again. This is Captain Vor to human commander. We are defending ourselves. Cease boarding operations or face heavy casualties. The reply came within seconds. Negative. We are executing orders from Earth Command. This sector is sovereign human territory. Resist, and we will escalate. Ver's teeth ground. Enough was enough, Lieutenant Skorin, she said. Prep. A cannon salvo. Use reduced yield just enough to collapse the corridor behind their main force. We trap them and protect the crew. Acknowledged. Skorin's hands moved briskly, charging railguns to optimal spread calculating impact to avoid spalling into adjacent sections. Ver took a moment to watch the nebulous swirling clouds through the viewports. Each breath felt heavy, the calm before a storm. She turned back to the tactical display when Skorin spoke. Cannon ready. Vor gave the order. Seconds later, two concussive booms rippled through the Aurelius, and a shudder ran down the hull. On the hologram, the corridor lights faded, the red crosses marking sealed sections multiplied, and the small human dots vanished from that zone. A hush fell over the bridge. Then the data scroll. Enemy troops contain no movement in Corridor 4-3. Casualties unknown. Vor allowed herself a small nod. Good work. Now shift to perimeter defense. Keep your fighters on the ready. I want eyes on every hatch and shaft. Below decks, Marines and security drones hunted for survivors. In the corridors still under Coalition control, crew members checked systems and administered medical aid to the wounded. The Aurelius's life support hummed steadily, its power grid strained but unbroken. On the human dreadnought, an alarm blared. Lieutenant Moya's face was pale. "Sir, our boarding operations have stalled. They've collapsed the access corridor. We cannot breach." Crew's hand tightened around the rail of his command chair. He exhaled slowly. "Then we negotiate." He keyed the comm line. "Coalition Captain Vor, this is Commander Elias Crew. Our orders were to secure your vessel. We have failed, but Earth Command demands this sector. I propose a ceasefire aboard a neutral shuttle. 15 minutes from now dock at Point Echo. Come alone on the Aurelius Bridge," Vor's communicator chirped. She glanced at her watch. It read 17:40 to sector time. She tapped the link. On the view screen, Crew's stern visage appeared. His silver hair glowed under the crimson alert lights of his bridge. Vor studied his eyes hard, unyielding, yet not without the shadow of doubt. She pressed her lips together. This was it, the first step toward an uncertain truce. She straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and spoke into the mic. "Very well, Commander. I will meet you at Point Echo in 10 minutes unarmed. May the survivors of this encounter remember we are all children of the stars." The connection closed. The bridge lights brightened to operational white. Returned to her officers. "Prepare the neutral shuttle. I go alone, and signal my Valkyries. Stand down until I return. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives answered her outside. The nebula's quiet beauty seemed untouched by the violence within. Yet in that swirling cosmic cradle, two captains now dared to weave a fragile peace from the wreckage of first contact. The neutral shuttle Aegis drifted between the colossal hulks of the Aurelius and the human dreadnought Seraphim, its airlock chamber a fragile bubble of truce. Captain Ilyanivor stood in civilian dress, the coalition badge tucked discreetly into her jacket. Opposite her, Commander Elias' crew wore the standard Earth expeditionary uniform, white with black trim, and neither brought a weapon. Between them, the cold expanse of space was an unspoken third party. But as the airlock cycle began, that neutrality splintered. One, the Parlever and crew met in the Aegis's small conference room, its steel walls humming with life support. A single viewport framed the two dreadnoughts, drifting like sleeping leviathans. Vor offered a curt nod. Crew returned it with a measured tilt of his head. "Thank you for coming." Vor began, voice steady. "I've seen enough bloodshed for one patrol. Let us speak frankly. What mandate sends you here?" Crew exhaled. "Earth Command never intended open war," he said. "Our orders were intelligence gathering confirm whether coalition forces have encroached on Sector Echo 9, then negotiations. But when your Valkyries attacked our pods, higher command interpreted it as hostility. They dispatched reinforcements." Vor frowned. "So you attacked first, then blamed us? Not so simple." Crew's eyes were weary. Cygnus Station reported increased coalition patrols near the old Terran jump gate. They feared Earth might seize it again. We sent the Seraphim to deconflict, but your fighters fired on ours. I tried to call it off, but by then we had no choice." Vor pressed her lips. "Your fighters disabled 3 of ours. 2 Valkyries were lost. How many of yours?" 4, Crew admitted. "We would have taken more casualties if we hadn't boarded your ship." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of recycled air. Then Vor leaned forward. "We need a binding non-aggression pact signed by Coalition Council and Earth Command, and demilitarized zones around the jump gate and Alari's trade routes." Crew nodded slowly. "Agreed, but we'll need proof of Earth's authority. Our Envoy from the United Terran Assembly must be present. Vor paused, then keyed her comm unit. Aurelius, this is Vor. Prepare for shuttle pickup. We need secure transport for Commander Crew and the Assembly Envoy. Outside, the Aegis airlock cycled open and closed again. In the corridor, Marine Guard and Earth peacekeepers stood watch, uneasy allies now. 2. Fractures in the ranks back on the Aurelius's bridge. Lieutenant Scorin watched as the Aegis retracted. Captain, Coalition intelligence just intercepted. Fleet Admiral Terran's personal logs. They're referencing Embertide objectives in Sector Echo 9. Ver's jaw tightened. Embertide, those shadow fleets the Council officially denies. Let me see. She tapped the tactical holomap, overlaying encrypted chatter. They're operating under deep cover, relaying sensor data on both our movements and the Seraphims. They've been the ones stirring the pot. Scorin's face went pale. So the real enemy has been manipulating both sides. Exactly. Vor stood. Alert, Admiral Marish. Force the Council to come clean. On Embertide, or we cannot in good conscience proceed with any treaty. Moments later, Admiral Marish's holo flickered into view, solemn. Captain Vor, I've convened an emergency session of the Council. They refuse to acknowledge Embertide publicly claim. It's a rogue myth, but our recon drones have visual confirmation. Multiple Embertide ships cloaked at the nebular edge. Vor ran a hand through her hair. Understood. Keep it off the record until we secure the treaty. Meanwhile, maintain diplomatic cover. If word leaks that either side harbors secret fleets, negotiations will collapse. Marish inclined his head. Proceed with caution. 3. Sabotage as the Aegis lifted crew and the Terran Assembly Envoy aboard the Seraphim. The Aurelius powered down its shields to release the neutral shuttle. That momentary vulnerability was all Embertide needed. A pulse of energy, deadly silence slammed into the Coalition dreadnought's bow. The viewport shook. Console lights flickered. Impact on forward shields. Scorin shouted. They hit. US with an antimatter jolt. Vor grabbed the command rail. Sparks lit the deck as power conduits overloaded. Battle stations, she yelled. This is not the Seraphim. They're firing on us. Across the void, the Seraphim's crew stared in horror as the shuttle bay was rocked by secondary explosions. Peacekeeper Marines scrambled to evacuate the Aegis, but an unseen third party had sabotaged both vessels' targeting arrays. On the Aurelius, Admiral Marish materialized in the holo viewport. Eyes wide, phantom signatures, Embertide cloaks. Vers. Heart pounded. They want us at each other's throats. Cut power to the forward reactor's channel to point defenses. I want every drone in space up and armed. Scorin and the weapons officers leapt to work. Down in the hangar, security drones whirred to life, scanning the dark void for Embertide CLOAKS.4. The breaking point in the bridge of the Seraphim. Commander Crew and the Assembly Envoy struggled to secure their footing as the ship shuddered. Report. Crew barked at his tactical officer. Coalition dreadnought is under fire from our sensors. A third force shipping based on Embertide tech. The officer replied. The envoy, a silver-haired woman named Anayachal, raised her hands. This was never our intent. Crew's face was grim. We must warn Captain Vor. If we don't expose Embertide tonight, Alliance and Coalition will be at war by dawn. The envoy tapped her comm badge. Aurelius. This is Assembly Envoy Chul. Cease all fire. This is sabotage by a third faction. We have shared enemies. Anver's bridge. Scorin relayed the message. They're under attack by the same force. Ver's grip on the console loosened. Put it on the council net. Every captain in this sector needs to know Embertide is real, and they're orchestrating this war. Moments later, a chorus of hailings and alarms echoed across the Coalition communications grid. Unknown beacons flickered online, showing the Embertide's triangular cruisers flitting in and out of nebular pockets. Marish's holo face was steely. By council decree, I authorize full disclosure. Stand down your fighters and hail all Coalition patrols. Join us to repel the intruders. Ver's voice rang like a clarion. All Coalition and human vessels, this is Captain Vor. We have been manipulated. Embertide ships are in our midst. I repeat, we fight them together or risk annihilation. Target any ship bearing the Phoenix. but also any vessel without Coalition or Terran registry. Trust your identification protocols. On the Seraphim, crew tapped his console. Phantom contacts locked, weapons hot. For humanity and Alliance, 5. Collision and collaboration. The swirling mists of the Anchorus Nebula. The standoff dissolved. Valkyries and Terran fighters surged side by side against Ember-Tide corvettes. Plasma discharges painted the gas clouds in violent streaks of crimson and gold. Drone frigates captured unshielded cruisers with magnetized nets, while Coalition, railguns and human plasma lances carved arcs of destruction. Vor and crew, once nearly at each other's throats, now fought shoulder to shoulder. When an Ember-Tide strike force blitzed toward the neutral zone near the jump gate, the two dreadnoughts bore down together, their broadsides synchronized in a deafening salvo that shattered the cloaks of 3 enemy ships. In one thrust, on the bridge of the Aurelius, Vor allowed herself a brief, fierce smile. They chose the wrong sector to invade. Across the void, Commander Crew mirrored her grin, and the wrong defenders. As Ember-Tide vessels dissolved into wreckage and retreat, the Coalition dreadnoughts' shields flared from 20% to full, and the Seraphim's bridge lights brightened with renewed hope. The parley that nearly ignited a war had instead forged an alliance in the crucible of betrayal. Yet even as the last Ember-Tide ship fled into the nebula's depths, both captains understood that the true struggle was only beginning, uncovering who had long manipulated peace and war alike, and ensuring that the scars of this betrayal would lead not to more bloodshed, but to lasting trust. And so, as the nebular light glimmered like fractured jewels around them, Coalition and human fleets regrouped. 2 warriors united against a hidden enemy, determined to rebuild what had been shattered and to bind their alliances with the iron of shared resolve. The nebular mists of the Anchorus expanse swirled in iridescent currents as Coalition and Terran fleets regrouped in the wake of the Ember-Tide ambush. Captain Ilyanivor stood once more on the bridge of the Aurelius, the tactical displays now showing friendly icons intermingled, blue triangles of Coalition dreadnoughts, and the fiery diamonds of Terran warships. Between them, shattered Ember-Tide corvettes drifted like broken beacons of a conspiracy half-revealed. Beside her, Lieutenant Scorin's console scrolled through decrypted Ember-Tide comm logs. "Captain, I've recovered their network keys. They were coordinating from a hidden command station at the old jump gate," she reported. Coordinates matched the ruins of Fort Caldera deep within the nebula's heart. Ver's gaze hardened. "Then that's where we go, ready in advance. Team, we hit the station, seize its logs, and expose whomever is pulling these strings." She turned to Commander Ril Asa, who monitored the repaired Valkyria squadrons. "Ril, form a strike wing. We'll need swift insertion." Asa saluted crisply. "Valkyries are fueled and armed with EMP munitions. They'll clear the way." Across the viewport, Captain Elias' crew of the Seraphim appeared in holo-communication. His face was solemn, lines of fatigue visible at the corners of his eyes. "Captain Vor, our Marines are ready to board alongside yours. We move as one." Vor inclined her head. "Together, Commander, let's finish this." One, into the heart of Shadowson hour later, a flotilla of Coalition frigates and Terran corvettes punched through the nebula's outer shell, escorting the battered Aurelius and Seraphim toward a yawning spatial rift. Beyond it lay the long-abandoned Fort Caldera, a ring of fortified platforms and collapsed corridors orbiting a turquoise ice planet. Once a colony guard outpost, it had surrendered to legend centuries ago, and now it hosted the puppet masters of the Ember-Tide. Valkyria pods streaked ahead, their EMP warheads arcing in bright pulses. Each pulse shimmered through the fort's inert defense grids, disabling automated turrets and energy barriers. Coalition and Terran Marines tumbled from boarding shuttles into the broken docking bay, boots hitting metal that hadn't felt habitation in ages. Captain Vor and Commander Crew led the ground assault side by side. Ver's Coalition Marines swept corridors with phosphor rifles, while Crew's Earth peacekeepers deployed sonic scanners to detect hidden traps. Flickering lights revealed Ember-Tide glyphs scrawled on the walls, an upside-down phoenix clutching a star heart, radiation spikes. Ahead, a Marine called. The corridor curved around a massive generator cavern, its machinery coated with dust and fractured cables. Crew's XO, Lieutenant Moya, knelt by a collapsed console. They've been siphoning power from the fort's remnant reactors to fuel their cloaking fields. Vor tapped her comm. Scorin, disable the reactor's emergency shutdown protocol. We need lasting power to seize their command uplink. Moments later, the hum of the generator stuttered and died. Lights across the complex winked out save for the isolation labs at the ring's core, where a dull red glow persisted. 2. The puppet masters reveal deep within the ring. Coalition and Terran forces converged on the isolation labs. Steel bulkheads gave way to reinforced blast doors emblazoned with the old Colony Guard emblem. A phoenix rising from shattered gear. Behind those doors lay the true architects of the Embertide. Vor placed her hand on the control panel. On my mark, she engaged the override. The doors hissed open. Inside, a vaulted chamber glowed with console arrays. At its center, 3 figures stood over a holographic projection of the expanse, their faces stern beneath the light of multiple screens. 2 War Coalition uniforms with a modified insignia. The 3-ring badge bisected by a dagger. The third was a civilian in an Earth expeditionary suit. Her eyes narrowed behind a visor. Imprison them, Vor ordered. Her Marines leveled rifles. The figures froze, then rose their hands. Commander Crew's voice boomed across the comm. Authorized by Coalition High Council Subsect and Earth Remnant Directorate. You have no jurisdiction here. The civilian laughed, voice crackling with static filters. Jurisdiction is a fiction. We are the true heirs of both Coalition and Empire keepers of the Phoenix Code. You think you've won because you fought a few drones. Vor stepped forward, eyes burning. You wanted us killing each other. Why? The second Coalition conspirator, tall man with silver hair, spoke. Our governments are corrupt, complacent. They hoard power while systems starve. We believed a controlled war would purge the weakness, force unity through fear. Crew's fist clenched. You sacrificed countless lives to foment tyranny. The woman in Earth expeditionary garb advanced. Call it evolution. Only through trial by fire can a new order emerge. Scorin deactivated the final console. Their cloaks offline. Grid collapsing. Alarms wailed as the fort began an automated self-destruct sequence triggered by the shutdown. Red lights pulsed and a countdown flickered overhead. Evacuate, Vor shouted. All teams, fall back to the Aurelius now. 3. Escape and Reckoning. Coalition and Terran forces fought their way back to the docking bay. The blast doors sealing behind them just as the cavern erupted. Shockwaves rattled the entire ring, sending debris tumbling into the planet's gravity. Well, Valkyria pods swooped in, pulling squads into safety as the isolation labs collapsed in a fiery bloom of steel and plasma. On the bridge of the Aurelius, Vor watched the destruction unfold through thermal scopes. The ring's outer shell cracked, and flaming fragments rained into the atmosphere below. Fort Caldera is gone, she reported softly. The conspirators are dead or captured. Marish's holo flickered. You did well, Captain. The Council will be convened immediately to root out subversion. Vor nodded once. I want full transparency, no more shadows. Crew appeared alongside Marish in the holo. And Earth Command will join in that effort. The Phoenix Code dies with Fort Caldera. Vor allowed herself a weary smile. Then let there be a new dawn. For, forging a future days later, in the refitted halls of Alari's station, a joint Coalition Terran Council convened beneath the shimmering nebula. On the station's panorama deck, Captain Vor, now a decorated diplomat, stood with Commander Crew, before representatives of both governments. Behind them, holographic displays showed the events that had transpired, the ambush, the boarding, the revelation of Embertide. Vor addressed the Council. We were almost driven to war by conspirators who traded on our histories and our fears. But in the crucible of conflict, we found solidarity. Let this treaty be our legacy. Peace born of sacrifice, trust forged in battle. Commander Crew unfurled the Treaty of Echo 9. Its clauses established shared patrols, demilitarized corridors, around strategic jump gates, and an independent alliance commission to oversee sector security. When Coalition and Terran delegates signed in unison, The chamber erupted in applause. Outside, the nebular veil glowed softly in violet and emerald, a silent witness to the end of one conflict and the birth of a lasting partnership. As captain, Vor and commander crew exited onto the observation deck. Vor placed a hand on the railing. "Do you think they'll hold to this?" she asked. Crew glanced at the swirling gases and the distant glimmer of Fort Caldera's remnants entering the planet's atmosphere. "They must. We've given them hope and reminded them of our shared destiny." Vor watched the nebula's light dance across the viewport. "Then perhaps one day, our children will inherit a legacy not of war, but of star-forged alliance." Crew nodded, the Phoenix and the Star rising together, and there, in the quiet glow of the Anchorus Nebula, two captains stood, symbols of unity, guardians of a fragile peace they had fought to secure. The human warship had indeed entered the sector, but in doing so, it had opened a path to a new era of cooperation among the stars.